All right, as promised for week one, we're mainly looking at introduction, figuring out what we're doing, hopefully not having too many tech issues, but problem solving and tech support if you are having issues getting contact with the course and all of that kind of thing. But we're also mainly talking about the curriculum and the syllabus and what the difference between those is. I also meant to mention a while ago, I've been teaching teachers in Queensland for 10 years, so it's possible that someone that I'm talking to right now is someone that I've taught in the past. If so, hi, and hopefully get in touch, wave your hand on the discussion board or in some other way indicate that we're old friends. So, okay, with that aside, let me kind of talk just a little bit about the senior syllabus. Now, we are actually addressing it now and again later on in the program. So this is an introduction. It's giving you some sense. You should get the document, read through it, get a really good sense of what's in there and why and what's happening with it and so on. But I'll try and introduce it as much as I can. The distinction between curriculum and syllabus, I think, is kind of an interesting one. And it doesn't always hold because, unfortunately, they've called the Australian syllabus the Australian curriculum. Sorry, let me try and backtrack and make that a bit clearer. So I would say, as it says on the slide, the syllabus is what the government body hands down. So the Department of Education and Training, or in the case of Queensland, the Queensland Curriculum and Assessment Authority, the QCAA, or in the case of nationally, ACARA, the Australian Curriculum and Reporting Authority, they create a document that mandates what the government says teachers ought to be teaching, or are required to be teaching, are mandated to be teaching. So the syllabus is kind of your Bible in the sense that if you leave out important things that are in the syllabus, you're not actually fully doing your job. But the syllabus is not in itself a curriculum. You can't just pick up the Australian curriculum or the Queensland syllabus and just teach straight from it. There's nowhere near enough information there. So curriculum is, I would argue, is developed in the school by the teacher or the teaching team. Now, ideally, if you're in a bigger school, you'll have a team of 3 or 4 physics teachers and you'll be working on things together and supporting each other and so on. Many heads are better than one, but a lot of my teaching career was in quite small schools of, high schools of 300 or 400, where I was the only physics teacher. So I got to develop stuff on my own, which has its own benefits because you don't have to work around other people's idiosyncrasies. So the curriculum is developed in the school, I would argue, and the syllabus is the government document that frames that. The curriculum is developed within the syllabus or to deliver the syllabus. Excuse me. So as I say, the Australian curriculum, in this terminology at least, is a syllabus, just to be slightly confusing. I'll try and consistently use my distinction, even if other people haven't accepted it. So curriculum development, you use the syllabus, you do it collaboratively, ideally, and if you are the sole teacher in a school, I would encourage getting in contact with others around the area. So if you're a small town, in a small town way out west, get in virtual contact with others. If you create networks during the course of this course, those networks can be really helpful in giving you support and so on as well. So, as I say, many heads are better than one. Steal from the best. Don't reinvent the wheel. There's a bunch of resources and a bunch of materials out there and so on. Do the right thing and acknowledge other people's work when you use it. But don't feel like you have to build everything from scratch, because you really don't. There's a lot of people teaching and a lot of people creating great stuff and a lot of people sharing stuff as well. Like if you create something really cool, I hope that you will share it, either Creative Commons license or just throw it on the internet so people can use it, because there's a lot of materials around. I think you have more freedom than you might think. Quite often we kind of look at the syllabus document and think that it's a straitjacket, but it's really not. It's really a very loose and open framework that we can work around to create a great course. And I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. And it's ongoing, obviously. You can't create your program of work and then teach the same program of work for 15 years. You have different students, you have different demands. Fortunately, in Queensland, we've been safe from changes to the syllabus for a long time. The senior physics syllabus was developed in 2007, and it hasn't really been majorly changed. There was a very light tweak in 2014, but we've actually been left alone for a long time, which is a great thing, although there are changes in the wind, and for beginning 2018, there will be a new senior syllabus, we're told, although these things often get pushed back as time comes closer. So we'll see what happens. But we're mainly preparing you to work with the current syllabus. I encourage people to actually create their work programs in terms of student activities. So what are the students doing rather than a list of the content to be taught? There's a longer lecture that I deliver to my on-campus classes about the syllabus and what a curriculum even is. Is it a list of activities? Is it a list of content? What's it for? Is it for reproducing the best parts of society or changing the worst parts of society? There's a whole lot of curriculum literature, but very briefly, trying to focus on making sure that you change up the student activities, because if you give just a topic, it's very easy to then go and lecture for the whole 40 minutes, 70 minutes, whatever, rather than having a range of things. And again, I'm kind of preaching to the choir on this, I know. I'm sure in your junior secondary, you know that they have short attention spans and you have to change it up fairly regularly. So, but I think planning in terms of what the students are actually doing, what activity can they get involved in that will develop this concept on their part? How are they testing their concept? The lab is hopefully not just, and I'll talk about this more later as well, not just confirming what you've talked about in class, but actually they are testing a concept that they know, that if it goes this way, it supports this concept, if it goes that way, it supports that concept. That they're really understanding what's happening rather than just following a cookbook. So the content, I guess, of the physics syllabus is a view of science and science education. So they've talked about, this is what we think science education is, what we think science is, and what they're for. It's well worth reading, and a rationale. So quite often people just leap to where's the list of content in the syllabus. But do read these preamble bits, because they actually really help you understand what you're trying to achieve and why. It talks about teaching in context. The draft version of the syllabus in 2006 required everything in all of year 11 and 12 to be taught in context. So we don't teach motion, we teach amusement park physics, and we get to the content around motion in the context of the amusement park. That was quite unwieldy, and it ends up being very artificial because you end up using the contexts but kind of hammering the content in to fit the context. So now we're required to teach 1 unit in context in year 11 and 1 unit in context in year 12. So again, we'll spend more time talking about what that means, but teaching in context is part of the Queensland syllabus, and it's one of the cool, interesting things about it. Then there's the content, the skills that the students need to be developing, so it's not just about acquiring content knowledge, and the attitudes and values. Do they value the evidence? Do they fudge the results of their experiment to get an expected answer, or are they faithful to what the empirical evidence actually says? So what attitudes and values are they developing? What are their ethics around their scientific knowledge? The kinds of assessment, which again we'll talk about in more detail. A supervised written assessment is basically a test, and it's kind of confusing that the acronym for it is an essay, because it sounds like an essay, but a supervised assessment is a test or something that's invigilated. Someone's watching them do it. An extended response task is like an assignment. It's something that they write. It's extended. They do some research in the library and so on. An extended experimental investigation, again, is one of those really cool features of the Queensland syllabus. And it's where they actually conduct something approximating real science. They have a question and a topic and a hypothesis, and they conduct experiments over multiple weeks and then write a report around it. There's an EEI in year 11 and an EEI in year 12. And again, we'll talk about that quite a lot more later in the program, but we wanted to just mention those things as coming up. As I mentioned, the curriculum itself isn't very long. The content is presented in 3 organisers: force, energy and motion, or forces, energy and motion, and I don't think they work particularly well. The syllabus is set up so that you're not required to teach in any particular order. You certainly don't have to do forces first, then energy, then motion. You can rearrange it as much as you like. It's very, very flexible. As I said, very open framework. So take advantage of that freedom and create a logic that makes sense to you. And that's what I've done in this course. I've said, it makes sense to me to start with motion first and talk about motion first and then get to forces quite early and energy. And also those organisers, I think, miss a lot of things that are quite important. Or they're just an odd way of organising it. So I tend not to worry too much about them. I think I've already mentioned the depth of treatment guide, Appendix 3, page 51 to 53. There's still bits that are repeated in that because it's organised according to the organisers. But if you actually look at that, that gives you a lot of the formulas and concepts and issues and ideas that are required. And it tells you, okay, we're not doing year 10 science anymore, this is higher level than that, but it also tells you, hey, settle down, we're not doing university science, this is the depth of treatment. This is the appropriate level at which we should study this. So that's probably the most useful piece of the whole document in terms of actual planning. So students in Queensland are required to do 220 hours of learning in physics across year 11 and 12, and that's the same for the other senior courses. I already mentioned that you get to decide the order as a teacher or a teacher team rather than the syllabus deciding it. 1 unit in context in each of year 11 and 12, 1 EI in year 11 and 12. So just emphasising that. I suggest lots of pracs. I know it's sometimes a hassle, sometimes you don't have resources, sometimes you can't get in the lab, etc., etc. But in science, we're not indoctrinating students about concepts and theories that they just memorize and regurgitate. We're helping them understand the physical world, and that's what labs are for, helping them place the ideas in context in the physical world. So I've been advocating 25% prac for 20 years that I've been teaching, and my students go out and do it and exceed it. My daughters were taught by one of my former students, and he was doing a third of his lessons had some kind of practical or demonstration or simulation or a whole variety of other things. So I really encourage getting that empirical nature into your science teaching. As mentioned, we know that the syllabuses or syllabi, I never know, are going to change from 2011 for year 11 and therefore rolling forward to 2018 for year 11. Rolling forward into 2019 for year 12 and the first students will graduate. We haven't had major external assessment in Queensland, but everybody else in the country has pretty much. So we're kind of dropping into line with the rest of the country. We'll have a 50% external exam. In some of the non-science and maths courses, it's 25%, but in senior sciences, it's 50. There will be fewer assessment tasks in addition to that across the 2 years. The assessment tasks will be pre-moderated. So you'll create your assessment task weeks out, not the day before, send it off to a panel, it will be checked and moderated, and they will say, yes, that's an appropriate assessment task before the students actually do it. So it's quite a different process from the current process. And we currently have a low definition syllabus. I've been saying you get to make lots of choices about it. The new syllabus is likely to be high definition, where they are much more rigid about what you do when and how much detail and all of that kind of thing. To me, that's a little bit of a retrograde step, but it's the way that we're going. So be aware of those changes, but it's early days. The draft documents are up. You can have a look at the draft documents. The draft assessments, some of them have been tried, but there's a long, long way to go before all this is implemented. So as I say, we're mainly focusing on the current syllabus documents. We'll come back to this stuff in Module 3. From now until then, we'll talk mainly around physics content, and then we'll come back and talk about assessment, exit criteria, moderation, verification, folios, all of the fun stuff about senior assessment, which is actually really kind of cool. And about week 11 and 12, we'll come back to that. But one of the things is, I'm an experienced teacher and teacher educator, so even though I'll be talking about the content for a while, I'll definitely be alluding to, hey, students find this concept difficult, here's a way that you might teach this more easily, and so on. So it'll be quite intertwined between the content and the teaching stuff, I hope.